Hello, everyone. Thanks for listening to FarmBits. Today, we're going to continue with the discussion regarding herbicide application technology with Rodrigo Werle and Proctor.
So, Chris, how do you think is the adaptability of the technology in Nebraska? And what about in Wisconsin, Rodrigo?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a great sense yet in terms of how. So let me start this way. There's not a lot of these. There's not a lot of these machines commercially available yet, right? So is very much new. I think this year I heard about more machines actually being utilized in a commercial sense, but still pretty limited relative to the total number of acres being managed for weeds. And so I think that's part of it is right now the technology is really in the very early stages and just starting to be scaled at all. But I think there's a big question there on who can utilize this technology most efficiently as it's first developed. How big of an operation do you need to have to be able to make it so that it pays, right? The kind of the return on investment question. And I think you think about commercial application or commercial applicators, co-ops, those are doing applications in those environments. I think they're really thinking about this question a lot too. And I know, Rodrigo, you've interacted with some of those folks, so you can probably add to that. But this idea that they've really built the commercial application around a certain model that includes broadcast spraying, and so now you bring this new technology. Probably is going to require a change in the whole business model for them to be able to adopt these technologies. So I think it remains to be seen. I think the interest is high. I think there's a lot of interest around the technology and the potential that could come from it. I think people are still waiting to see where it fits. Is probably what I would say at this point.
Yeah, no, that's excellent there, Chris. The one thing I was going to mention, I think Nebraska and Wisconsin, there's some differences there as far as the operation sizes. I think farms in Nebraska they tend to be bigger than the farms here in Wisconsin. So I don't know, Chris, if you can comment what the split is, but here in Wisconsin, for instance, more than 60% of our acres are treated by the co-ops or commercial applicators, right? So if we want to see this technologies taken off, there need to be some major adjustments to this operations and how business get done, because it has to make sense for the co-op, so then it makes sense for the farmer. So it might be a little bit of a different scenario from Nebraska and some other states where there's more acres, where we have more private applicators, farmers, owning a sprayer, making their applications, because again, it's a big investment, right? We haven't talked about costs, but in order to purchase this technology, not only you're getting a sprayer, but you're also getting a smart sprayer now. So there's an extra cost associated to the technology as well. And depending which technology you're purchasing, there's also subscription fee, right? It might be an yearly fee, it might be a per acre fee. So there are some additional costs that are added to the system. So again, it goes back to the ROI and how is that going to be part of this new business model. So I think Chris said it all is yet to be seen, and there's a lot to happen here as we move forward.
Chris, what future trends and innovations can be expected in the field of pesticides application technology?
Man, if I knew the answer to that, Victor, I don't know. I might be in a different line of work, but it's a fascinating question. I think I think challenges lead to innovation, and that's what's been fun about the work I've been able to be a part of. You find that it's what's the next challenge that we're facing in our cropping systems in managing agronomic crops, and then what's the solution going to be? And so I don't know that I have a great sense of how to answer that, other than to say I do think we're going to get better at leveraging and utilizing the data that we're generating. I think we're going to get more efficient around that process. And I think as we generate that data, I think there's going to be solutions that emerge from that process that we might not have anticipated. So I think that's going to be a big piece of it. And then I think as we think about climate smart management and just the need for regulation just around protecting our resources and the environment, I think as those things change and evolve over time, I think that's going to drive a lot of innovation. I think those types of things tend to drive innovation. So I think paying attention to those spaces becomes important. So yeah, I don't know that I can speak specifically, but if I think broadly and kind of sidestep your question a little bit, I think that's a little bit what I would anticipate. I'm excited to see though where it goes. I think it's exciting. Hope to be at least part of the conversation.
It's an incredibly exciting time to be in weed science. There's so much happening from all fronts. Just adding to Chris's comments there as far as what the future trends look like and innovations. I think historically we've used selective chemistry delivered across the entire field. Right now we're talking about targeted applications, and I'm just gonna add an example here. I met with an organic farmer that is very interested in this technologies. There are some labeled organic herbicides or registered organic herbicides out there, right? But some of those herbicides are really, really expensive. And then his idea where he was going with his mindset, if I can reduce the use of this by a third or 2/3, then it becomes, an option for me to control weeds with this labeled organic pesticides in my organic cropping systems, right? So here's an example where this technology can really help not only on the conventional food production systems, but also in this case, an organic production system, right? Now thinking back, Chris mentioned, these technologies are not there yet in the sense of separating, let's say, a foxtail from a Palmer amaranth plant, but I think this is where it's getting, right? And if we get to the point where we can tell what is the certain weed species, okay, that we're targeting in the field, then we open up opportunities for, let's say, non-selective herbicides, right? Herbicides that you could never spray across your entire field, but if you're only treating 10, 20% of your field in there and you're only spotting the selective herbicide in certain areas, that might become a new reality, okay? So what are the options that we have out there that we can really control this resistant weeds so we prevent them from going to seed? So whether it's, old herbicides that you could never deploy on a broadcast application, or whether that's novel chemistry that can be partnered with adjuvants and so on. So we're talking cost. Potentially there might be herbicides that are too expensive to be sprayed in the entire area, so we can reduce costs that way, or herbicides that would cause a lot of damage to our crops because they're non-selective. But if you're only treating parts of the field, maybe we can live with a little bit of crop injury, right? As long as we can control our weeds. So I think there's a lot of opportunities, as we move forward with these technologies.
Those points are very interesting. And Rodrigo, how can university measure the return of investment of application technology to the community?
Well, Camila, that is a difficult question to answer. It's a really good question and a difficult one to answer, right? So the ROI there's to the community. I think the main point right now in agriculture, we're trying to produce food in a sustainable way. I think that's the mission from most farmers out there. They have to be profitable, right, to stay in business and to do the right things. There's pressure from every single angle, right? We're in weed science, we're disciplined, we're constantly under scrutiny as we, because we work with pesticides, right? So if we can be more targeted, we can save the farmers some pesticides. If you can help the farmer with that ROI, allows the farmer to invest in other areas that can also benefit the community. So I'm just kind of mumbling around because I don't think there's a straightforward answer to your question. But again, as the farmers, as the technologies come online, the farmers can be more targeted. That takes some of that pressure from the general public away. And I think at the end of the day, it helps the farmer to be more sustainable, more profitable. If we have profitable farming systems in our rural communities that really help our rural communities to continue to thrive. And I think this is what we need out there. So I don't know if I answered your question directly, but it's just a complicated one to tackle. Chris.
Yeah, I don't know that I can do any better than that, Rodrigo. I think the only thought I would maybe add to that is, if you're measuring it in dollars, I think that's really a tricky one. But I'd highlight a little bit of what I think the hope is that these technologies would maybe improve the communication between urban environments, rural environments. Right. I think to see more of food production as a partnership that kind of spans all the way across the society. Right. Farmers are certainly the ones in the field doing the level of work, but it benefits all of us. And so I think to be able to see these types of technologies adopted and to improve the conversations around what growers are doing and how these technologies benefit not just the grower but society. I think there are interesting ways to think about how conversations around technology. So yeah, again, I don't know that exactly answers your question, but it's worth thinking about. I think it's an important one to be.
Rodrigo, what are the challenges to adapt new technologies in the community? Can you see that influence of university and extension programs?
Yeah, so I think, with new technologies, there's always a lot of uncertainties, right? And then when, new technologies come online, there's always, if you're at the forefront of adopting a new technology, usually there is a very high cost associated. So I think the cost is a barrier, and also the uncertainty. And I think this is why it becomes in my opinion, right? I work for Extension, so I might be a little biased, but I think this is why it's so important when we in universities, through the extension system, we get to take a look at the technologies before they become widely available to our growers out there. One, we can have a better understanding. Our growers out there, they're oftentimes kind of coming to us, right? Because they want to know an unbiased opinion. And if we haven't dealt with that technology, or if we don't know anyone within extension or academia that are working with those technologies, it becomes difficult for us to provide unbiased recommendations, right? So I think it's important that we get to look at these technologies and explore their potentials, and also potential challenges that they might face, right? I mean, through this efforts here, I think Chris and I, through our research, I think we learned several things that I think we've been able to help those equipment manufacturers think a little more about how to position. So I think it's a win for all. And then as always, there's that uncertainty related again to the new technology. Not all farmers out there want to be at that forefront, but in every single community, there's always those individuals that are willing to take the risk, right? They're the ones that are willing to pay a little more and take the risk because they want to be at the forefront. So it's also very important for us in extension that we get to work with those individuals, because they are usually the ones that are the influencers within their community. So we get to learn from them, and we also hopefully get to help them fine tune what they're doing. So as those technologies become more popular, we're all adopting them in a more effective way.
Yeah, I mean, adoption's it's just, those are interesting conversations around adoption of any new practice or technology. More and more, I think evidence would show that data alone doesn't change anybody's minds. So we can have all the right data and have all the perfect answers as to why this new technology should be adopted, but that in and of itself, I don't think will get us all the way there. And I think that's where extension sits in a unique place, in that I think extension plays a huge role in those relationships with growers and in local communities, in urban environments, all those different places. And so it's having those connections with people and being able to have actual conversations and not just putting data in front of people and expecting that to change, but it's how do you turn it more into a conversation over time and build it around relationships and kind of this give and take. And so being willing to listen as much as you speak, those kinds of things are all important, I think, as we think about adoption. And so yeah, I think that's kind of the human science side of it all, and that's where extension sits in a unique place between kind of the science and just the relational side of things, which is, I think, is critical in this whole piece, in this around this whole conversation.
I think right now it's a very fun time to be talking about technologies. A lot of farmers out there, they're part of producer-led groups, and these producer-led groups, they are heavily usually involved with extension. They support extension, and this is where the farmers are coming together and exchanging ideas more than ever. I think that's very, very important, right? Because there's, farmers are very busy. They have to make a lot of decisions throughout the year. There's certain things that were always done that way within the farm. We do it because it's efficient, it's worked. So why change, right? So through the research, we get the data that helps us support the recommendations. And then through these groups, we have the opportunity to discuss, and maybe get a different viewpoint or revisit our research priorities, in the sense that, yeah, we're providing the information that the growers need to support their decision whether they should be considering adopting a certain technology or not. So it's just a very, very exciting time, not only to be in weed science, but also to be part of extension.
And Chris, if our listeners want to learn more about the smart sprayer research, where can they find more information?
Yeah, and I mean, so Rodrigo mentioned the webinar that we did earlier. So I think that's been a great resource, kind of introducing the technology. We've done some surveys, just trying to gain an understanding of people's perceptions around new technology, smart sprayer technology, and so we've been able to make some of that available, just to continue the conversation around these things. And I think going forward, we'll see more out there, just in terms of extension publications and articles and those types of things. And so yeah, I think the resources are increasing around this, right? So it is relatively new, but I think there's more and more resources available out there, and so I just keep your eye on a lot of the mechanisms that we've used through extension. Crop Watch would be one in Nebraska, for example, a newsletter that we utilize. These types of podcasts. I mean, so this would be one great option. I think that's why I appreciate you guys inviting us to have the conversation on this, because I think this is a great resource. And so, but also anyone that's interested can certainly email me. So we can make my contact information available through the podcast. But I'd be happy to chat more with people and about what I think we're learning via email or phone call or something like that. So, but yeah, thanks for that question.
It's so new, right, Chris? I mean, I think the first presentations we've had about this technologies at our regional scientific societies were about 3-4 years ago, and we're starting to see an uptick on the number of posters being presented. You have a graduate student in your lab working on that. I have, a graduate student in my lab doing this type of work. So I think we're going to start to see a lot more at our scientific conferences here for the next couple of years. And as those results get published, we're going to start hearing more and more about them. So long story short, I mean, it's all so new that I don't think we have a lot out there yet. So as Chris alluded to, the webinar, I think, for those that are interested in learning a little more, I think we highly recommend. I'll ask you, Victor and Camila, if you can, put the link down below here so folks that are interested, if they can go there and check. It's a 2-hour webinar, but I think it's worth the time, right, Chris? And again, there's some other colleagues recording podcasts on this topic as well. So yeah, stay tuned. I think there's a lot more to come. I mean, this winter extension season here for the first time, I'm going to be talking about this, and I believe it's the same for Chris. I just got invited to give an extension presentation here in Wisconsin. I'll be doing one in Minnesota, and then talking about this on a crop protection webinar here in a couple weeks. So I think there's a lot of interest, so new, and there's going to be a lot more information coming online here, hopefully in the next year or so. And also, connect with the manufacturers. I mean, they're pretty active on social media. They're getting their teams of engineers and agronomists out there. So make sure you chase them, and you have the chance to go and talk with them out there, because they have a lot of good information in hands that they can also share with you if you're interested.
That's great. Yeah, Camila and I will make sure that we're gonna make available that link for the webinar, Rodrigo and Chris. And Chris, is there anything we didn't talk about today that you might want to add or mention to share with our listeners, Chris or Rodrigo?
Yeah, I don't know that I would. I think we covered a lot of topics in a pretty short amount of time, so I don't know that I'd add anything other than to say I'm pretty interested to see where these conversations go. I would invite feedback from anyone listening, that has thoughts or interests. I think there's a lot that we can learn from each other at this point in terms of just continuing these conversations, because there's anytime you're thinking about things where there's not a lot of information yet, I think those conversations are valuable. And so that's probably where I would leave the conversation for today is I hope that it continues. I hope that maybe this is more the beginning of a conversation that I'd like to see where it takes us.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with Chris. Those folks out there that are listening to us right now, if you think we're missing something major, let us know. I mean, please challenge us, because this is how we continue to evolve. Again, this technologies, they have a lot of tremendous potential, but there are also some challenges associated to them. So we want to hear from you. I think this is a two-way conversation. And then from a broader point of view, what we've seen over the years is kind of a decline of, undergraduate or young people out there interested in agriculture in general. And the one thing I want to say is there are so many opportunities with high technology and sustainability, and producing food, protecting the environment is a really, really, really exciting time to be in agriculture. I know a lot of the young generation, they listen to podcasts, so hopefully they're listening to us today. Lots of really neat job opportunities, tremendous opportunities for folks out there. So again, it's a very exciting time to be in agriculture, and those who are undecided whether they should join, an ag career or not, I strongly encourage. We need the energy. We need, the bright individuals out there to come and help us. We have a lot of challenges, right? Resistance being one of them. So we need all the help we can get. And when I'm saying we're talking we in academia and extension and industry and our growers out there, because together is how we get better here. So that's one thing I wanted to share with the listeners.
That's interesting, and it connects with our last question. So a tradition on the FarmBits podcast is to ask for a piece of advice. What advice do you have for anyone interested in working with pesticide application technology?
That's a fun question. Advice is tricky, right? But I think for me, be curious and don't be afraid to ask questions. That's how we see technology advance and things move forward is when people are curious and don't hit roadblocks and stop, but start asking questions. How are we going to solve this? How are we going to figure out a way around this? Just to jump in and go for it. And so I think looking for opportunities, asking good questions, and always be curious, and I think find what you love to do, pursue what you enjoy. That's, I guess, those are things that I've tried to live by, and it's been good. I can say I really do enjoy what I do, and I've had a lot of fun doing it. And so a big part is working with like you, Victor, and Camila as students. I think having those opportunities and just the conversations that we've had, and the things that we've been able to talk through and think through, and your contributions have been huge. And so yeah, I think I would just encourage folks to think about those things.
I concur 100% with what Chris said in there. And again, my piece of advice, again, especially for the young folks, what I just described, there are a lot of opportunities in agriculture. We're gonna need all the help that we can get here to continue to feed and fuel society here. So just a lot of opportunities out there. It's an amazing career path and profession too. You get a good mix of indoors and outdoors, I guess, right? Good balance. So for folks out there, again, thinking about their professional careers and where they want to go, if they like the outdoors and environment and so on, I think there's a lot of opportunities here within our discipline. And with that, I want to take a moment to thank you both, Victor and Camila, for the invite. It was a lot of fun being here today. Chris, great visiting here with you as well. Today we get to do in front of a microphone and camera, but just these are normal or regular conversations that Chris and I have at least once a week, right, Chris? When we're driving somewhere, going somewhere, we always like to talk about these technologies and plans, and that's I guess an advice. We're so dependent of our cell phones, and I don't think we take the time to talk with people anymore, and it's amazing what an hour conversation can do for you. So if you reach out to people, talk to people, exchange ideas. I mean, I think being human beings, cell phones are amazing, right? Being able to text or connect via social media, but there's nothing better than actually calling somebody and talking there and exchanging ideas and seeing what we can be doing together. So that's kind of another advice here for the end of my part here.
That's great. So thank you very much to Rodrigo Werle and Chris Proctor for taking the time to join us for this episode of the FarmBits podcast.
It's really exciting to hear about pesticide application technology, focusing in herbicides and new technologies being developed in this field. Thank you.
Okay, let me stop recording.
I think it's there. Yeah.
Here. One of my favorite parts of this episode was the possibility that extension connects with the new technologies. For example, Rodrigo and Chris mentioned about the smart sprayer, and the most part of our episode was related with the smart sprayer. So connecting new technologies and having those new technologies being widespread to farmers using the university extension is very, very interesting for me, and that was for sure my favorite part of this episode. What do you think, Camila?
I also think how fascinating are the future possible opportunities that we still have to advance in technology for pesticide application.
I hope you enjoyed that episode, and we look forward to sharing another Digital Ag story with you next week on FarmBits. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to join us today on the FarmBits podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, or wherever you listen to the podcast to be informed about the latest content each week.
We welcome your feedback, so if you have comments or questions for us, please reach out to us over email, on Twitter, or in the reviews section of your favorite podcast platform. Our contact information can be found in the show notes.
We would like to thank Nebraska Extension for their support for this podcast and their commitment to providing high-quality informational material to members of the agricultural community in Nebraska and beyond.
The opinions expressed by the host and guests on this podcast are solely their own and do not reflect the views of Nebraska Extension or the University of Nebraska.
We look forward to